Hi, Blazers. Dr. Raz here. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about photosynthesis, just give a kind of an overview. And then Thursday and Friday, we'll do the light reactions and the independent light reactions, which we can refer to as the dark reactions, Thursday, Friday. And then next week, we will do cell respiration, spend a few days on that. And then I'll go through a kind of a checklist on cell respiration and photosynthesis with you. And we'll, kind of finish everything up relative to photosynthesis and cell respiration. And then prepare for the block exam, which will happen the Tuesday right after Labor Day. So we're down really to this week and next week are the last 2 weeks of instruction. And then we'll go right into the block exam. All right. So let's take a look first at this overview of photosynthesis here. If you remember back to freshman year when you had IB biology, we know that photosynthesis is a way for plants to take in a gas, carbon dioxide, and in the presence of light, sunlight, use that to produce a carbohydrate or sugar, most notably. Usually we use glucose as the form in order to make their own food and thus obviously stay alive. So again, when we're talking about photosynthesis, we're talking about autotrophs, right? Self-feeders. They have to be able to make their own food. And we're specifically talking about green plants, right? Plants that are going to have the green pigment chlorophyll inside of them. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at. And then when they produce this sugar, that's going to be the energy that the plant needs to stay alive. So we go from light energy to chemical energy, the sugar. And that's what we'll be kind of focusing on when we look at this particular chapter. So again, here's the overview. Here's our sunlight, right, which is our primary energy source for photosynthesis. It beats down on organisms, our green plants here, and they do a couple things. They're going to take in the carbon dioxide from the air. They're going to also take in water, and they're going to give off oxygen gas. So here's that gas exchange, right, from carbon dioxide to oxygen. And in the process, they'll also produce their own food, and that food is going to be their main energy source. So that's kind of the main piece of photosynthesis, right? So sunlight, and then our chemical energy being made. I always say, always follow the arrows, even with complex diagrams that IB might give you. If you follow the arrows, you'll almost always get the answer, right? Here we see carbon dioxide coming in. We see oxygen going out. We see sunlight coming in, water coming in. So follow the arrows and you really can't go wrong. Now, we also look at light, right, as part of the visible light spectrum. So here is our wavelengths, right? And you can see the visible light is just a tiny fraction of the light spectrum here. And we go obviously from red light, which gives us the highest amount of units, to violet down here, which is the lower amount of units. So we're roughly going from about 800 to down to about 350. But you can see it's a very small part of the light spectrum. Now the violet is going to give us our shortest wavelengths, right? Starting about 350. And the red light spectrum is going to give us the longest wavelengths. So what you'll also notice, of course, is that those colors also are a part of those visible colors that we can see are part of that the rainbow, right? When sunlight hits the water droplets that are in the air, and it reflects the various colors, we're able to then actually see the rainbow as part of the visible light spectrum. Now, in order for photosynthesis to occur, now remember I said we're talking about autotrophs, the self-eaters, and we're specifically talking about green plants. And the reason they're green is because of this organelle here, the chloroplast, right? Inside of our chloroplast, we have little, they almost look like coins, which are called thylakoids. And those thylakoids are stacked into groups called grana. So this whole piece here is grana or granum. Granum, I guess, is the singular, grana is the plural. So we have lots of these grana made up of individual thylakoids. And the sunlight comes in to the chloroplast, into the thylakoid, and it gets reflected back out in some sort of color. So we're going to look at the different types that we have: chlorophyll A, we have chlorophyll B, we have the carotenoids. So all of that is going to come into play. Now, green light is really what we see because that's reflected more than any other color. And that's why our plants appear to be green. Now, a couple things. We have a couple spectra. First, what we call the absorption spectra. And we see the two types of chlorophyll here, right? Chlorophyll A in the dark green, chlorophyll B here in the light green, and then the carotenoids, which would be like your reds, oranges, yellows. Those are your carotenoids. So if we have the light spectrum down here, the wavelength for that, and we have how much light is being absorbed here, we can see where these peaks come in, right? If we follow chlorophyll A, we see that at the lower light energy area where we have our violets and our blues, we see a spike. Then it drops down, and then we're going to see it spike up again. Much more light being absorbed once we're hitting those oranges and red colors. Chlorophyll B spikes a little bit later, at about 500 on our wavelengths here, and then it will spike again. Again, not as much as chlorophyll A, but it does spike when we're getting into those orange colors. And then we can see our carotenoids here that end up not spiking at all. So we're not getting any reflection on that. So this is absorption versus the wavelengths of light that we have here. The second type of spectra is called the action spectra. And if we look at this particular graph, we're going to be looking here at the rate of photosynthesis. How quickly or slowly does photosynthesis actually occur, depending upon which wavelength we happen to be in. Now we see we have a high rate of photosynthesis up here in the violet blue area here. It's our highest. And then the second highest is when we hit the orange red areas. And these could kind of be placed over the first spectrum that we looked at. And you can kind of superimpose them and see that they're pretty similar. The rate is equal really to the absorption. So again, just a little review here with photosynthesis. Here's the equation that we use. These numbers here, 6, you see these here. This is just so that our equation is balanced. So we have 6 carbon dioxides, right? We take that in from the atmosphere, plus the water, right, that comes in. And of course, the water comes from the ground, the root system. In the presence of sunlight, the plant will make the C6H12O6 is the general formula for a monosaccharide called glucose. So we list that. That's going to be the food and energy for the plant. And the plant gives off gives off oxygen gas. So anything to the left of the arrow are what we call the reactants. Anything to the right of the arrow is our products. So if you're asked, to give the reactants of photosynthesis, we would be over here. If we were asked to give the products of photosynthesis, you'd be over here. Now, this particular process here, right, where that light energy gets absorbed, from the sunlight here in the chloroplast because of the green pigment chlorophyll, we split our water, we produce our oxygen. This whole process is what we call photolysis. And again, our light reactions, which we're gonna look more deeply at starting on Thursday. Again, our sunlight comes in, water has to come in, carbon dioxide eventually comes in, and we're going to give off oxygen gas and make a sugar so the plant can stay alive. And when we're talking about the carbon compounds here, as you can see, carbohydrates, which are your sugars and your starches, and we very specifically are going to be making the monosaccharide glucose here. Again, always follow the arrows. You can see we're making energy, we're bringing in NADPH, we're giving off or letting go of NADP+, and we are taking adenosine diphosphate here, adding the phosphate to it in order to get our ATP molecule, which is going to give energy to our plant. Now, the rate of photosynthesis, of course, is affected by other environmental factors, and we look at a couple here. This is light intensity, right? If we look, as our light gets brighter or warmer, however you want to say that, the rate of photosynthesis goes up until it plateaus, because you're not just going to keep increasing the rate of photosynthesis. At some point, it hits its peak, and it's going to level off. Same thing with carbon dioxide concentration, right? The rate of photosynthesis goes up until it reaches a plateau period. And then it will stop. It'll level off, I should say, at giving off carbon dioxide. Enzymes, here again, we're looking at the rate of photosynthesis. We're looking at, again, we know that photosynthesis does have an optimum temperature, right? And at some point, it'll level off. And then if that optimum temperature will contribute to what we call the denaturization of our enzymes. So the enzymes begin to denature, and our rate of photosynthesis is going to drop significantly, right? We cannot maintain or have our temperature keep going up and up. At some point, the enzymes are going to denature because of the amount of sunlight that's coming in, and we're going to see a steep drop in the rate of photosynthesis. Now, we know that photosynthesis was really a major event, right? Because up until organisms began to produce oxygen, we had a atmosphere here on Earth that really could not sustain life because of the amount of hydrogen that was in the air. And it was very toxic to organisms. So the evolving or the evolution of photosynthesis really has contributed to making Earth much more livable place. So, that carbon dioxide oxygen exchange that we get between autotrophs and heterotrophs is what has made Earth really livable for organisms like ourselves. The more oxygen that we found in the atmosphere, the more oxygen we are going to find in not only in the water in the oceans, but in rock and places like that. So, photosynthesis really, was a huge deal when we're talking about the evolution of the planet itself. Now, over time, we see, oxygen levels here went up and up here. And about 20 million years or so ago, we started to see a spike that correlated to the emergence or the beginning of organisms that were photosynthetic. So, here's where our green plants come into play and become really important, especially with that gas exchange. So we're grateful to the bacteria who produced all that oxygen initially, and then which allowed then the green plants to come along and start to populate the earth. So there's just a couple of introductory questions for you. I'll take a look at just posting a short kind of formative assessment piece on the spectra, just to make sure you understand where we're at and where we're going, because that's really the new piece that we've added from your freshman year. So here's just a couple review questions. If you have these down, you'll have no problem understanding photosynthesis. So that's it for this lesson. Any questions, you know where to find me. And then Thursday, Friday, we'll take a look a little more in depth at the first the light reactions, and then the what we call light-dependent reactions, and then on Friday, the light-independent reactions. Thanks, Blazers.